Hi, welcome back. It's Laura at Hyperstamper, and today's junk journal is an Easter journal. And I know it's still, a month and a half away, but I wanted to get it in its lucky new owner's hands, whoever that may be, with lots of time before Easter, which is in March this year. So I've got this beautiful vintage cross stitch, and it is absolutely beautiful. I really love this. It's got the two little bunnies there having a kiss amongst the spring flowers, and I've taken some vintage beads here and I've strung them up to match that cover, and then I've got some nice cheesecloth here and some vintage ribbon down the side, and this is a piece of vintage fabric here that I turned into a tie. And the book itself is about 75 years old, but had a rather plain cover, so it was perfect to be the home of this Easter journal. I only have enough ephemera, I think, this year for 2 Easter journals. It's really hard because of my style. I make sure that every single page is Easter themed, so that's not easy to do. So I've been collecting all year, and everything in here, every single page is authentic, antique, and vintage ephemera and is Easter themed. So let's take a little journey through here before I put it in my Etsy store. This is a beautiful page here of rabbits and bunnies from the 1920s, from a children's book. And this is from an art education book, a teacher's manual actually, from the 1920s as well. And it's all little children's depictions here of Easter flowers, daffodils, tulips there, lilies, just beautiful. I love it. A little cluster here, and this is a plate from the early 1900s as well. Christ is risen plate there, and that's a beautiful full color plate, and I left the back alone in case somebody did want to remove it. Now this piece here I love. It is from 1927, and it is from this book here, which is the Book of Good Needlework, and I have never come across one of these books before, so I am just thrilled with it. But I did pull this piece out of it here, and it's got the rabbit family at home and this beautiful little tree here on the other side, which is a tea cozy, and then down there it's an old-fashioned valentine. So I thought that was kind of fun, and I got this from that little word game from the 1920s, and I put it here because it's for a flock of sheep. And then we've got our little sheep down there, and that's also from the 1930s, that one there. Look at the little Easter bonnet. I've got this here. This is from the 40s, from an Easter book I had, and that one is a child's Easter. And then here's another one of these story pages here from that same book as the first one from the 1920s. Antique paper on the back, so you can journal on there. And I really like this here. It is from the 1920s as well, from a How Things to Make and Do book, and it's on basketry, just like a little Easter basket. Now I've folded this up and left 2 little pockets here for people to put their own little special things in. So that's another little hidden spot for you. And this is a vintage music sheet, a Easter hymn. And then just a nice page here for you to do some journaling on. And this is from the early 1900s. And that is all about Easter lilies. Where do Easter lilies grow? It says at the bottom. That's the flip side of it. Absolutely beautiful. I didn't want to cover it. This here is also from the 1930s, so that is just beautiful. I have a few of these pages because I owned about 3 or 4 of these books, and that one says at Easter time, the Easter lilies there. This is the front of a storybook page, the front page of the book, and that is from the 30s as well. I pulled that from an antique book there, Easter Day. And here is one of the best things in this book. It is actually a very valuable postcard because it has that silver gilding on it. It's got these gorgeous irises and the little tug of war with the worm with the Easter chicks and Easter greetings. And it was never used. It's absolutely spectacular. So lucky person who gets this journal will have that. And then this here is a beautiful Easter card from likely from the 50s. And you can do tons of journaling inside. And what I like about it is somebody probably had it on their counter and used it to do some math one day and then realized that, oops, I just wrote on a card. This is another 1930s children's book page here, and it's actually a double page spread, which I love. I added a vintage doily in here, and this here is from the 1920s. I put some antique paper here because there was a bit of a tear and I didn't want it to rip. But look at this little duckling finding the egg under the flowers. Isn't that beautiful? I love it. It's so adorable. More wonderful Easter bunnies. Here's a little girl in her Easter outfit with her gloves and her Easter bonnet. And then in here is a 1940s transfer. And that, of course, is a little lamb. Perfect for Easter as well. And that would have been a needlepoint transfer. And this is really cool here. Even though it doesn't look like this is an Easter picture, it is from the 1920s. And it is written down here, Grandma in Atlantic City, where we spent Easter 1936. So sorry, it's 1936 photo. Love it. And then there's Grandma on the back as well in San Juan. Isn't that fabulous? It's not very often you get a photograph that is Easter themed, that old, almost 100 years old. And this I found in a vintage book here. It is an Easter dinner. So I pulled all the pages and I was going to split them up, but I decided to keep them together. And you've got, there you go, your Easter menu right there if you want to do a 1940s Easter. This I pulled from an 1800s book because it's got this beautiful carrot on it. The root vegetable. Isn't that fun? You just think like, so fun. Okay, so daffodils, we all know that's a wonderful spring flower, and that came from a vintage botanical book. Now this here is not Easter themed, however, it is for this book because it was the front page of this actual book that I'm using, The Robe, which is actually a story about the Easter story. So it's an important piece, and there's the original library card there, or sorry, the owner's plate there, and the original inscription. So I really wanted that to stay with the book forever. There's another wonderful Easter hymn there from an antique music book. And then this came flying out of a book I found. Some child had drawn a lamb and then cut it out. And it fell out of a book. So I wanted to keep that, and this is the perfect place to keep it. More wonderful rabbits. This is a fantastic illustrator. This one, look at the mushrooms and the rabbit in the tree. This here, we've got the bunny inside the Easter basket. This is from another different book, The Enormous Easter Egg. And then over here, let's see, 2 seconds. I've got these pressed flowers here because I always think of flowers at Easter and in the spring. This wonderful 1930s picture here, the funny bunny rabbit. Funny, funny, oh my God. This is some vintage ribbon here that I got at an auction. I bought a sewing box at an auction, and this was stuffed inside of it. That's pretty cool. Now, this is an actual book cover, and I chose it because it had flowers on it for spring. And this is another 1920s piece here. And actually, this might be earlier than 1920s. And look at that, the bunny on both sides. You can tell by the artwork it is quite old. And then here's another one, different artist here. But again, just lovely girl and boy bunnies there. And then on the flip side, I've got a receipt here, a vintage receipt, a vintage recipe card for journaling on. And then here is another book cover turned journaling, and it's got the goose on it and some flowers there as well. And then down here is just the internal spine of a book and a beautiful little pull here from an antique music book, vintage botanical book. This is a vintage napkin that I just cut down because it had the Easter colors in it. So I like that. Another Easter page here. This is great. This is from the 70s. And so vintage, and it's a chocolate Easter egg recipe. Isn't that great? Not very often. I've never actually seen one, never. There's a beautiful little illustration down here. Slippers is the name of that bunny. And then this came from an 1800s book, and it's got Easter on both sides there. Some poems there. Now this here is, oopsie, this is from the 1920s and made in England, Newly Spring Fasteners, and I chose it because it has spring down the side, and it's got the pastel colors. So I like to put my little sewing notions in all my journals if I can. Look at this. This is a vintage pattern, the instruction sheet to make a bunny. Isn't that cool? How to make a stuffed bunny. And I just pulled this from a vintage magazine. Little girl with her Easter bag, her Easter bonnet, and her gloves. I just love it. This is a vintage piece of writing paper, and it's got the embossed image of a Victorian woman there. So even though it's not particularly Easter themed, I wanted some more journaling space. This is from the early 1900s. This is another kind of things to make and do book, an art book. And it's got how to draw a chick. And then this is from a 1930s book. April 7th was an Easter surprise. And then we've got the little chicks on the other side. This is more of that instruction for the Easter bunny. And in here is another iron-on piece. And that is vintage. You can actually see the raised piece. And that is a trial. So you would have tried that on a scrap piece of material to make sure that it worked and your iron didn't stick to it. And that pretty much brings us to the end. This is the last page of an Easter book here. And this is cool. I pulled this from the London Illustrator from 1936. And it is for Easter cruises, an advertisement. Love it. So I hope you love this as much as I loved making it. It's very special. And don't forget to come back soon and subscribe. Bye for now.